Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he crawled out from under the damaged hover truck. The twin suns of Kepler 442b beat down mercilessly on the red sand dunes that stretched endlessly in every direction. His mobile repair station was the only sign of civilization for hundreds of kilometers, a lonely outpost in this desolate corner of the galaxy. The Interstellar Mining Consortium had hired him to maintain their fleet of vehicles in this remote sector. It was honest work, and the pay was good enough to keep him independent. No corporate overlords breathing down his neck. No alien bureaucrats telling him how to do his job. Just him, his tools, and the endless parade of broken machinery that kept the mining operation running. He checked his chronometer. The supply convoy wasn't due for another 3 days. That gave him plenty of time to finish the repairs on the hover truck, and maybe catch up on some maintenance for his own equipment. The desert was quiet except for the constant hum of his generator and the occasional whistle of wind through the rock formations. Marcus had been working on Kepler 442b for 2 years now. The planet was rich in rare earth elements that were essential for faster-than-light drive construction. The mining operation employed thousands of workers from dozens of different species, but they all stayed at the main compound 200 kilometers to the east. Marcus preferred the solitude of his desert station. As he reached for his plasma welder, a strange sound caught his attention. It was faint, almost lost in the wind, but distinctly different from the usual desert noises. He paused, listening carefully. There it was again, a high-pitched chirping that seemed to come from somewhere behind his workshop. Curious, Marcus grabbed his tool belt and walked around the corrugated metal building that housed his equipment. The sound grew louder as he approached a cluster of weathered boulders that had provided some shelter when he first set up his station. The chirping was definitely coming from within the rocks. He climbed carefully over the loose stones, following the sound. In a small depression between 2 large boulders, partially hidden by accumulated sand and debris, he found something that made him stop dead in his tracks. It was an egg, but not just any egg. This one was nearly a meter long and covered in scales that shimmered with an iridescent blue-green color. The shell was cracked and something was moving inside. The chirping sounds were coming from whatever was trying to break free. Marcus had seen plenty of alien life forms during his years working in space. The galaxy was full of strange creatures, and most mining planets had their share of indigenous species. But he had never seen anything like this. The egg looked almost crystalline in places, and he could swear he saw energy patterns flowing beneath the surface. As he watched, fascinated, a section of the shell cracked wider. A small clawed appendage pushed through, followed by what looked like a tiny snout. The creature inside was struggling to break free, but it seemed weak and exhausted. Without thinking, Marcus reached out to help. He carefully peeled away pieces of the broken shell, being cautious not to hurt whatever was inside. The creature's chirping grew more excited as more of the shell came away. When the last piece fell free, Marcus found himself staring at something that defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. The creature was about the size of a house cat, with scales that seemed to shift color in the light. It had 4 legs, a long neck, and wings that were currently folded against its back, but most striking of all were its eyes, large, intelligent, and definitely aware. It looked exactly like a dragon from old Earth legends. The little creature looked up at Marcus with those ancient-seeming eyes and made a soft, trilling sound. It was clearly just hatched and completely helpless. Its movements were unsteady, and Marcus could see that it was shivering despite the desert heat. He had no idea what to do. This was definitely not covered in any maintenance manual he had ever read, but the creature was obviously in distress, and every instinct he had told him to help it. Marcus carefully scooped up the dragon hatchling, surprised by how warm it felt against his hands. There was a strange tingling sensation where his skin touched its scales, almost like a mild electrical current. The creature seemed to relax in his grip, its chirping becoming softer and more content. He carried it back to his workshop, his mind racing with questions. Where had this egg come from? How long had it been in those rocks? And what was he supposed to do with a baby dragon on a mining planet in the middle of nowhere? Inside his workshop, Marcus cleared a space on his workbench and gently set the creature down. It immediately began exploring, its tiny claws clicking on the metal surface. Despite having just hatched, it seemed remarkably alert and curious about its surroundings. The dragon's scales were even more beautiful in the artificial light of his workshop. They seemed to contain their own source of illumination, creating patterns that reminded Marcus of circuit boards or neural networks. When the creature moved, waves of color flowed across its body like living aurora. It was then that Marcus noticed something truly extraordinary. As the dragon explored his workbench, every piece of electronic equipment it came near began to behave strangely. His diagnostic scanner started showing readings it had never displayed before. His quantum communicator, which had been broken for months, suddenly flickered to life. Even his simple flashlight began emitting a different spectrum of light when the creature passed by. The dragon seemed completely unaware that it was affecting the electronics. It was too busy investigating this new world it had hatched into, but Marcus was beginning to realize that he had stumbled upon something far more significant than just an unusual animal. He watched as the creature approached his most sophisticated piece of equipment, a quantum field generator, that he used for the most delicate repairs. The moment the dragon's scales came within a few centimeters of the device, the generator began operating at efficiency levels that should have been impossible. The energy readings were off the charts. Marcus sat down heavily on his stool, trying to process what he was seeing. This little creature wasn't just some exotic animal. It was somehow interfacing with technology in ways that defied known science. The implications were staggering. As if sensing his amazement, the dragon looked up at him and made that soft trilling sound again. In that moment, Marcus felt a connection forming between them, something deeper than just sympathy for a helpless creature. It was as if the dragon was trying to communicate with him on a level he didn't fully understand yet. He reached out slowly, and the dragon climbed onto his hand without hesitation. The tingling sensation was stronger now, and Marcus could swear he felt something like thoughts that weren't his own, brushing against the edges of his consciousness. Whatever this creature was, Marcus knew his quiet life as a desert mechanic had just become infinitely more complicated. 3 days had passed since Marcus discovered the dragon hatchling, and his entire world had been turned upside down. The little creature, which he had started calling Nova, because of the way its scales seemed to contain starlight, had grown noticeably larger. What had once been the size of a house cat was now closer to a small dog, and its appetite was becoming a serious concern. Nova didn't eat normal food. Marcus had tried offering it ration bars, synthesized protein, even some of the local plant life he had cataloged around his station. The dragon had sniffed at everything politely but showed no interest in consuming any of it. Instead, Nova seemed to feed on energy itself. Marcus first noticed this when he found Nova curled up next to his main power generator, its scales glowing brighter than usual. The generator's output readings showed it was running at only 60% capacity, but somehow his workshop was receiving more power than ever before. Nova wasn't draining the generator, it was amplifying it. The dragon's effect on his equipment was becoming more pronounced by the hour. His simple diagnostic tools were now performing functions he didn't even know they were capable of. The broken quantum communicator wasn't just working again, it was picking up signals from frequencies that shouldn't have existed. Most unsettling of all, his computers were starting to display information he had never programmed into them. This morning, Marcus had found complex mathematical equations scrolling across his main screen. When he tried to understand them, he realized they were describing energy conversion processes that were theoretically impossible according to known physics. The equations seemed to be writing themselves, appearing whenever Nova was near the computer terminal. The dragon itself was changing too. Its intelligence was developing at an alarming rate. What had started as simple curiosity about its environment was evolving into something much more sophisticated. Nova was beginning to understand the purpose of different tools and equipment. Marcus had watched in amazement as the creature figured out how to operate his welding torch, creating perfect seams in scrap metal with precision that would have impressed master craftsmen. But it was the dreams that really convinced Marcus he was dealing with something extraordinary. Since Nova's arrival, Marcus had been experiencing vivid dreams that felt more like memories. He saw vast cities made of crystal and light, populated by beings of incredible beauty and wisdom. He witnessed epic battles fought across the void of space where creatures like Nova, but fully grown and magnificent, danced between the stars themselves. Most disturbing of all, he saw the destruction of entire worlds, their civilizations reduced to nothing but scattered ruins and hidden eggs. When he woke from these dreams, Marcus often found Nova watching him with those ancient eyes, as if the creature knew exactly what he had seen. The connection between them was growing stronger, and Marcus was beginning to suspect that Nova was somehow sharing its racial memories with him. The supply convoy arrived right on schedule, interrupting Marcus's increasingly complex thoughts about his unusual companion. He quickly moved Nova to a hidden compartment he had built in his workshop's storage area. The dragon seemed to understand the need for secrecy, remaining perfectly quiet as the cargo haulers unloaded supplies and picked up the repaired vehicles. Captain Torres, the convoy leader, was a gruff Centaurian who had been running supply routes for over 30 years. He was also one of the few people Marcus considered a friend in this sector of space. "You look tired, amigo," Torres observed as they completed the manifest check. "Everything okay out here in the middle of nowhere?" Marcus forced a casual smile. "Just been working on some challenging repairs. Nothing I can't handle." Torres nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, if you need anything extra, just put in a request. The mining operation is doing well, so they're not being stingy with the supply budget." After the convoy departed, Marcus released Nova from its hiding place. The dragon immediately went to investigate the new supplies, its scales shifting through patterns of color that Marcus was beginning to recognize as expressions of emotion. Nova was excited about something. Following the dragon's interest, Marcus discovered that Nova was drawn to a particular container of rare earth elements that were destined for the main mining facility. When Nova approached the container, the elements inside began to emit a faint glow that was visible even through the shielded walls. An idea began to form in Marcus's mind. These weren't just any rare earth elements. They were the specific materials used in faster-than-light drive construction. If Nova could affect them the way it affected his other equipment, the implications were staggering. With careful precision, Marcus opened the container and extracted a small sample of the processed elements. Nova approached eagerly, and the moment the dragon's scales came into contact with the material, both creature and elements began to resonate with the same frequency. The sample in Marcus's hands transformed before his eyes. What had been a relatively simple metallic compound became something far more complex. Its molecular structure was rearranging itself into patterns that looked like the equations that had been appearing on his computer. Screens. Nova made a sound Marcus had never heard before. Not a chirp or a trill, but something that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and speak directly to his mind. Suddenly Marcus understood. Nova wasn't just affecting his equipment randomly. The dragon was trying to teach him something. Over the following hours, Marcus worked alongside Nova to understand what the creature was showing him. The dragon would touch different pieces of equipment or materials, demonstrating how energy could be manipulated in ways that conventional science said were impossible. Marcus began to see patterns in Nova's actions, principles that could revolutionize everything from power generation to space travel. The breakthrough came when Nova combined its influence over the rare earth elements with Marcus's quantum field generator. The result was a localized distortion in space-time that lasted only a few seconds but was visible to the naked eye. Marcus watched in awe as a section of his workshop floor seemed to fold in on itself, creating a glimpse of what lay beyond normal dimensional barriers. In that moment of distortion, Marcus caught a brief glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. On the other side of the dimensional fold, he saw ships. Not human ships and not belonging to any of the known alien species in the galactic community. These vessels were sleek and predatory, clearly built for war, and they were moving with purpose toward inhabited systems. The vision lasted only seconds before the distortion collapsed, but it was enough. Nova's race hadn't just vanished from the galaxy due to natural causes. They had been driven into hiding by something that was still out there, still hunting. As if confirming his fears, Nova pressed closer to Marcus and shared another flash of memory. This time, Marcus saw the eggs, thousands of them, being hidden across the galaxy in the final desperate hours before Nova's species made their last stand. The dragons hadn't just been trying to preserve their race. They had been preparing for a war that was yet to come. Marcus looked down at Nova, who was regarding him with those impossibly wise eyes. The dragon was no longer just a fascinating creature he had rescued. Nova was a weapon, a key to technologies that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. And if Marcus's vision had been accurate, That power was going to be needed sooner than anyone realized. The little dragon trilled softly and curled up against Marcus's chest. Despite its growing size and incredible abilities, Nova was still just a hatchling who needed protection and guidance. But Marcus was beginning to understand that protecting Nova meant more than just keeping the creature safe from corporate interests or government scientists. He was going to have to prepare for a war that most of the galaxy didn't even know was coming. And somehow, a human mechanic in the middle of a desert was going to play a crucial role in determining whether civilization survived what was headed their way. 2 weeks after the dimensional distortion incident, Marcus had completely rebuilt his workshop around Nova's unique abilities. What had once been a simple repair station now resembled something between a high-tech laboratory and an ancient temple. Strange crystalline formations that Nova had somehow grown from the rare earth elements jutted from the walls, pulsing with their own internal light and amplifying the dragon's influence over nearby technology. Nova itself had undergone dramatic changes. Now the size of a large dog, the dragon's scales had developed intricate patterns that looked like living circuit boards. Its wings, while still too small for flight, crackled with energy that made the air around them shimmer. Most remarkably, Nova was beginning to communicate in ways that went beyond the empathic connection they had first shared. The dragon had learned to manipulate Marcus's computer systems directly, causing complex diagrams and star charts to appear on his screens. Through these images, Nova was teaching Marcus about its species' true history and the threat that was approaching known space. The race that Nova belonged to called themselves the Drakmari, and they had once been the guardians of the galaxy. For millions of years, they had used their unique ability to interface with both technology and the fundamental forces of the universe to maintain peace between worlds and protect developing civilizations from cosmic threats. But 50,000 years ago, something had emerged from the void between galaxies, a species so ancient and malevolent that the Drakmari referred to them only as the Devourers. These beings consumed not just worlds or civilizations, but the very concept of life itself. They turned living systems into twisted mockeries of their former selves, spreading like a cancer across entire sectors of space. The war between the Drakmari and the Devourers had lasted for millennia. Despite their advanced technology and mastery over cosmic forces, the dragons had been slowly losing ground. The Devourers adapted to every weapon, absorbed every defense, and grew stronger with each victory. In their final desperate gambit, the surviving Drakmari had scattered their eggs across the galaxy and gone into hiding, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. They had foreseen that other species would eventually rise to take their place as guardians. But they needed to survive long enough for that transition to occur. Nova showed Marcus star charts that revealed the current positions of Devourer scout fleets. They were still out there, slowly working their way through the outer rim territories, consuming everything in their path. But their advance had slowed dramatically since the Drakmari disappeared. Without their primary enemy to hunt, the Devourers had become less focused, more scattered in their approach. That was about to change. Through Nova's shared memories, Marcus learned that the Devourers had developed a way to detect Drakmari life signatures. Every time one of the hidden eggs hatched, it sent out a psychic beacon that could be traced across vast distances. Nova's emergence had already been detected, and the nearest Devourer fleet was adjusting course toward Kepler 442b. Marcus stared at the star charts with growing horror. The enemy fleet was still months away, but when it arrived, it wouldn't just destroy the mining operation or even the planet. The Devourers would follow the psychic trail back to every world that had ships or personnel connected to the system. Hundreds of billions of lives were at risk because of Nova's hatching, but Nova wasn't finished with its revelations. The dragon showed Marcus another set of diagrams, these ones depicting human technology and society. The images focused particularly on humanity's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. The Drakmari had been watching human expansion into space with great interest, recognizing qualities that reminded them of their own species in its prime. According to Nova's racial memories, humans possessed something that even the advanced Drakmari had lacked, an innate resistance to the Devourer's corruption. Where other species could be turned against their own kind or absorbed into the enemy collective, humans had a stubborn individuality that made them nearly impossible to corrupt completely. This was why Nova's egg had been placed on a world where humans were likely to find it. The Drekmari had planned for one of their hatchlings to bond with a human partner, combining dragon technology with human adaptability to create something new, a weapon that could finally tip the balance against the Devourers. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was just a mechanic who had wanted a quiet life fixing machines in the desert. Now he was apparently humanity's last hope against an ancient evil that threatened the entire galaxy. Nova sensed his distress and moved closer, projecting feelings of comfort and reassurance. But along with the emotional support came new information, technical specifications that made Marcus's head spin with their complexity. The dragon was showing him how to build something that had never existed before. A hybrid vessel that combined Drekmari biotechnology with human engineering principles. The ship would be alive in ways that conventional vessels couldn't match, powered by Nova's energy manipulation abilities and controlled through their psychic bond. But building such a ship would require resources that Marcus didn't have access to in his desert workshop. He would need rare materials, advanced manufacturing equipment, and most importantly, he would need to convince other humans to help him without revealing Nova's existence to the wrong people. The challenge seemed impossible until Marcus remembered something, Captain. Torres had mentioned during his last visit. The mining consortium was planning to expand their operations, bringing in heavy construction equipment and materials processing facilities. If Marcus could gain access to those resources without arousing suspicion, he might be able to begin construction of their impossible ship. The plan that formed in Marcus's mind was audacious and risky. He would need to gradually modify the mining equipment to serve his purposes, using Nova's abilities to enhance their capabilities beyond their original specifications. He would have to work slowly and carefully, making changes that appeared to be normal maintenance and upgrades, while actually building components for their secret project. Most dangerous of all, he would eventually need to recruit allies. The ship Nova had shown him was too complex for one person to build alone, even with dragon assistance. Marcus would need to find other humans who could be trusted with the truth, people who would believe an impossible story and commit to an even more impossible mission. Nova projected agreement with his thoughts, along with a new piece of information that both encouraged and terrified him. The dragon's psychic connection worked both ways. Just as Nova could share its memories with Marcus, he could potentially share human knowledge and experiences with other Drekmari hatchlings when they emerged. The scattered eggs across the galaxy weren't just individual dragons waiting to hatch. They were a network, connected through quantum entanglement principles that allowed information to pass between them instantaneously, across any distance. Nova's bonding with a human would provide a template that other hatchlings could use to form similar partnerships with members of different species. But this also meant that every moment they delayed gave the Devourers more time to track down other hidden eggs. The enemy was methodical and patient, but they were also inexorable. Each week that passed brought them closer to finding and destroying the next generation of dragons before they could fulfill their purpose. Marcus looked around his transformed workshop, at the crystal formations that pulsed with alien energy, and the equipment that had been enhanced beyond recognition. 3 weeks ago, he had been a simple mechanic with a simple life. Now he was the keeper of cosmic secrets and the potential savior of galactic civilization. Nova chirped softly and touched one of the star charts with a claw. The display zoomed in on their local sector, showing the paths of various cargo ships and passenger transports. The dragon was trying to tell him something about the people who regularly passed through this system. Suddenly, Marcus understood. Nova wasn't just showing him shipping routes, it was showing him recruitment opportunities. Among the regular traffic through Kepler 442b were representatives from dozens of different species, many of them skilled in exactly the kinds of technologies they would need for their project. The dragon had already identified potential allies, and it was time for Marcus to start building the team that would help them save the galaxy. The question was whether he could convince anyone to believe a story that sounded like pure science fiction, even when that story was about to become their reality. The first person Marcus approached was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had been studying the unique ecosystem of Kepler 442b for the past 6 months. Her research station was located 50 kilometers from his workshop, close enough for regular communication, but far enough to maintain operational independence from the mining consortium. Marcus had met Dr. Vasquez during routine supply runs, and he had been impressed by her scientific curiosity and open-minded approach to alien phenomena. If anyone would be willing to consider the impossible, it would be her, but convincing her to believe in Nova would require careful planning. He started by gradually introducing anomalies into their conversations. During their weekly radio check-ins, Marcus began mentioning strange energy readings around his workshop, unusual electromagnetic signatures that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Dr. Vasquez's scientific instincts were immediately aroused, and she requested permission to investigate. When she arrived at Marcus's station 3 days later, Nova was carefully hidden in the secret compartment Marcus had expanded for that purpose. But the dragon's influence on the surrounding technology was impossible to conceal. Dr. Vasquez's scanning equipment immediately detected energy patterns that violated several fundamental laws of physics. "Marcus, what exactly have you been doing out here?" she asked, studying her instruments with growing excitement. "These readings suggest you've discovered some kind of exotic matter that shouldn't exist according to current scientific understanding." Marcus had rehearsed this moment carefully with Nova's guidance. The dragon had helped him understand exactly what evidence would be most convincing to a scientist of Dr. Vasquez's caliber. "I think you should see this," Marcus said, leading her to his main workstation. The quantum field generator that Nova had modified was running a demonstration program that the dragon had designed specifically for this moment. As Dr. Vasquez watched in amazement, the device created a series of controlled space-time distortions that allowed brief glimpses into alternate dimensional layers. For a few seconds, she could see the mathematical structures that underlied reality itself. Equations made manifest in the form of dancing energy patterns. "This is impossible," she whispered, but her tone carried wonder rather than disbelief. "Marcus, this technology is centuries ahead of anything we currently possess. Where did you get it?" That was Marcus's cue to reveal Nova. The dragon emerged from its hiding place with theatrical timing that Marcus suspected was deliberately calculated for maximum impact. Nova had grown even larger in recent weeks, now nearly the size of a small horse, and its scales had developed patterns that seemed to incorporate elements from both organic neural networks and advanced circuitry. Dr. Vasquez froze as Nova approached, her scientific training warring with the impossibility of what she was seeing. The dragon solved her dilemma by gently touching her scanner with one claw. Immediately, her equipment began displaying detailed biological and energy analysis readings that provided irrefutable proof of Nova's existence. "My God," Dr. Vasquez breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's not just alive, it's interfacing directly with my instruments. Marcus, this creature is demonstrating capabilities that we don't even have theoretical frameworks to explain." Over the following hours, Marcus explained everything: Nova's origins, the visions of the approaching devourers, and the desperate plan to build a hybrid vessel that could stand against the ancient enemy. He watched Dr. Vasquez's expression shift from skepticism to comprehension to determination as she absorbed the full implications of what he was telling her. "You realize that what you're describing would require a complete revolution in our understanding of physics, biology, and engineering," she said finally. "We're talking about technologies that combine organic and artificial systems in ways that shouldn't be possible." Nova responded by projecting a series of technical specifications directly into Dr. Vasquez's mind through the empathic connection it had learned to extend to others. The scientist gasped as alien knowledge flooded her consciousness, showing her exactly how the impossible technologies could work. "I see it now," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The mathematical principles are beautiful. Organic quantum computing systems that use living neural networks to process information at speeds that would make our best AIs look primitive. Marcus, this isn't just about building a ship. We're looking at the next stage of technological evolution." Dr. Vasquez's recruitment was a crucial success, but Marcus knew they would need more help. Nova's memory sharing had shown him the complexity of what they were attempting to build. The hybrid vessel would require expertise in fields ranging from exotic materials science to advanced propulsion systems. Their next recruit came from an unexpected source. Captain Torres arrived for his regular supply run 2 weeks later, but this time he was accompanied by a passenger. Zrakth, a Vorthon engineer who specialized in quantum mechanics and dimensional theory. The Vorthons were a relatively new species to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years earlier. But they had quickly established themselves as some of the most innovative engineers in known space, with an intuitive understanding of multidimensional physics that impressed even older, more advanced civilizations. Zrakth had come to Kepler 442b to study the planet's unusual gravitational anomalies, which were affecting shipping routes through the system. But when Nova sensed the Vorthon's presence, the dragon became extremely excited, projecting feelings of recognition and anticipation. Through their psychic connection, Nova explained that the Vorthons possessed a natural ability to perceive quantum probability fields, a talent that would be essential for operating the hybrid vessel's exotic control systems. The dragon species had always worked most effectively with partners who could see beyond the limitations of three-dimensional space. Introducing Zrakth to Nova proved easier than Marcus had expected. The Vorthon's natural sensitivity to quantum fluctuations meant that he immediately detected the dragon's presence, even before the formal introduction. When Nova emerged from hiding, Zrakth's forearms spread wide in a gesture of welcome that seemed to transcend species barriers. "Fascinating," Zrakth said in his translator-modified voice. "This entity generates quantum resonance patterns that suggest a deep integration with the fundamental structure of space-time itself. The technological implications are extraordinary." Unlike Dr. Vasquez, who had needed time to process the scientific impossibility of Nova's existence, Zrakth seemed to accept the dragon's abilities as simply a more advanced application of principles he already understood. Within hours, he was working alongside Nova to refine the technical specifications for their secret project. The Vorthon's involvement brought new possibilities to their planning. Zrakth had connections throughout the engineering community, and his reputation would lend credibility to their eventual recruitment efforts. More importantly, his understanding of quantum mechanics filled crucial gaps in the hybrid vessel's design specifications. But as their small group grew, so did the risks. Each new person who learned about Nova increased the chances that word would leak to the wrong ears. The mining consortium, the galactic government, and other powerful organizations would all want to claim Nova for their own purposes if they discovered the dragon's existence. Even more dangerous was the possibility that the Devourers had agents operating within civilized space. Nova's racial memories suggested that the ancient enemy was skilled at infiltration and corruption, turning trusted allies into unwitting servants of their cause. These concerns became reality sooner than Marcus had feared. During their third week of collaboration, Dr. Vasquez detected unusual scanner sweeps passing through the system, energy signatures that didn't match any known exploration or scientific equipment. Someone was looking for something specific in their sector of space. Nova's reaction to these scans was immediate and alarming. The dragon's scales shifted to deep red patterns that Marcus had learned to associate with extreme danger, and their psychic connection filled with images of approaching Devourer scout ships. "They're closer than we thought," Marcus realized with growing dread. "Nova, how long do we have?" The dragon projected a series of star charts showing the calculated approach vectors of multiple enemy fleets. The images were terrifying in their implications. The Devourers weren't just sending a single force to investigate Nova's hatching. They were mobilizing an entire invasion armada, apparently convinced that the emergence of a new Drakmari represented an existential threat to their plans. According to Nova's calculations, they had perhaps 6 months before the first enemy scouts reached Kepler 442b. The main invasion force would arrive 3 months after that, giving them less than a year to complete their impossible ship and somehow convince the galactic community to prepare for a war that most civilizations didn't even know was coming. Zrak studied the projections with his species, characteristic analytical calm. "The mathematical probabilities are not encouraging," he observed. "However, I detect patterns in the enemy approach vectors that suggest operational limitations. They are powerful, but they are not omnipotent." Dr. Vasquez was more direct in her assessment. "We need more people, and we need them fast. If we're going to build this ship and mount any kind of defense, we'll have to start revealing Nova's existence to people we can trust. The secret is too big to keep much longer." Marcus nodded reluctantly. He had hoped to maintain Nova's secrecy until their preparations were further along, But the approaching threat was forcing their hand. The time for careful recruitment was over. They would have to start building their alliance more aggressively, even if it meant taking greater risks. Nova seemed to sense his decision and projected agreement along with a new piece of information. The dragon's connection to its unhatched siblings was growing stronger as they approached maturity. Soon, other eggs would begin to emerge across the galaxy, each one creating new opportunities for partnership, but also new targets for the Devourers to track. The race to save civilization was about to begin in earnest, and Marcus was no longer sure that time was on their side. 4 months had passed since the first Devourer scouts had been detected, and Marcus's desert workshop had been transformed into something that barely resembled its original purpose. The Mining Consortium's expansion project had provided the perfect cover for their activities, allowing them to requisition massive amounts of exotic materials and advanced manufacturing equipment without arousing suspicion. What had once been a simple repair station now sprawled across several square kilometers of desert floor. Underground construction bays housed the growing skeleton of their hybrid vessel, while above ground, seemingly random equipment installations masked the ship's most sensitive components. To any casual observer, it looked like an unusually complex mining operation. In reality, it was becoming the most advanced shipyard in the galaxy. Nova had grown tremendously during this period, now reaching the size of a small spacecraft itself. The dragon's scales had evolved into something that looked more like living metal than biological tissue, and its wings had finally developed enough to support short flights around the construction site. But the most dramatic change was in Nova's mental capabilities. The dragon was now functioning as the central intelligence for their entire operation, coordinating construction activities with a precision that no conventional computer system could match. Their team had expanded as well. Dr. Vasquez had recruited 3 of her most trusted colleagues, specialists in xenobiology, quantum physics, and materials science who had all proven capable of accepting the extraordinary truth about Nova and the approaching threat. Zrakth had brought in 2 other Vorthans whose expertise in dimensional engineering was proving crucial for the ship's exotic propulsion systems, but their most important new ally was someone none of them had expected to find: Commander Sarah. Chen had arrived on Kepler 442b as part of a routine military inspection of the mining operation's security protocols. A veteran of several border conflicts with hostile alien species, she had the kind of tactical experience that their growing alliance desperately needed. More importantly, she had the connections within human military circles that would be essential for convincing Earth's government to take the Devourer threat seriously. Chen's recruitment had been different from the others. Rather than gradually introducing her to the truth, circumstances had forced them to reveal everything at once. When a Devourer probe had penetrated the system's outer defenses, the probe had been small, no larger than a conventional fighter craft, but its approach had triggered every early warning system Nova had helped them install around the mining operation. When Commander Chen had responded to investigate the unidentified contact, she had found herself face-to-face with technology that defied every tactical manual she had ever studied. The Devourer probe had been unlike anything in the known technological database. Its hull seemed to absorb energy weapons rather than being damaged by them, and its own weapons fired some kind of corruption beam that turned Chen's fighter systems against her. Only Nova's direct intervention had saved her, the dragon somehow reaching across space to purge the enemy influence from her ship's computers. After that encounter, there had been no choice but to bring Chen into their inner circle. The commander's military training helped her adapt quickly to the impossible reality of Nova and the approaching invasion, and her strategic expertise proved invaluable in planning their defense preparations. Under Chen's guidance, they had begun reaching out to trusted contacts throughout human space and beyond. The story they told was carefully crafted to reveal just enough truth to motivate action, without sounding completely unbelievable. They spoke of an ancient threat returning to the galaxy, of advanced defensive technologies that needed to be developed quickly, and of the crucial importance of interspecies cooperation in the face of cosmic danger. The response had been mixed, but encouraging. Several human colonies had agreed to begin defensive preparations based on Chen's recommendations. A handful of alien species had expressed interest in the new technologies that Nova's abilities were making possible. Most importantly, they had established a network of communication that could coordinate resistance efforts when the invasion finally arrived. But their primary focus remained the hybrid vessel taking shape in the underground construction bays. The ship was unlike anything that had ever been built before, a fusion of Drakmari biotechnology, human engineering ingenuity, and Vorthon dimensional theory that created something entirely new. The vessel's hull was grown rather than assembled, using techniques that Nova had taught them for manipulating matter at the quantum level. The resulting structure was alive in ways that conventional ships could never match, capable of healing damage, adapting to new threats, and evolving its capabilities based on tactical requirements. The propulsion system represented an even more radical departure from known technology. Instead of relying on conventional faster-than-light drives, the ship would move by manipulating the dimensional barriers between alternate realities. This would allow it to bypass normal space entirely, making it nearly impossible for enemy forces to track or intercept. Most importantly, the ship's control systems were designed around Nova's unique abilities. The Dragon would serve as both pilot and computer core, its consciousness directly interfaced with every system on the vessel. This level of integration would provide response times and tactical flexibility that no conventional crew could match. But building such a ship required more than just advanced technology. It demanded a fundamental understanding of principles that most scientists still considered theoretical at best. Every day brought new challenges as they pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. The breakthrough that finally made everything click came when Dr. Vasquez succeeded in creating a stable neural interface between human consciousness and Nova's quantum biological systems. The process was based on techniques the Dragon had shown them, but adapted for human neurological patterns. When Marcus became the first human to successfully interface with the ship's developing consciousness, the experience was overwhelming. For a brief moment, he could perceive the universe the way Nova did, as a vast web of interconnected energy patterns where thought and reality were separated by only the thinnest of barriers. Through that connection, Marcus finally understood what they were truly building. The hybrid vessel wasn't just a ship. It was a new form of life that combined the best qualities of organic and artificial intelligence. It would be capable of learning, growing, and evolving in ways that conventional technology never could. But the interface experiments also revealed a disturbing truth about the approaching enemy. Nova's enhanced connection to its unhatched siblings brought news that other dragon eggs were beginning to emerge across the galaxy, and the Devourers were systematically hunting them. Down 3 young dragons had already been captured or killed by enemy forces. Their potential partnerships with other species cut short before they could develop. The pattern of attack suggested that the Devourers had learned from their ancient war with the Drakmari and were determined not to allow a new generation of dragon-bonded defenders to emerge. This intelligence added urgency to their work, but it also provided new opportunities. Each time the Devourers attacked another hatching site, Nova learned more about their current capabilities and tactics. The enemy was powerful, but they were not invincible. They relied heavily on corruption and conversion of existing technology, rather than building their own systems from scratch. This weakness suggested a potential strategy for the coming conflict. If they could build ships and weapons that were fundamentally incompatible with Devourer corruption techniques, they might be able to level the playing field despite being vastly outnumbered. The hybrid vessel represented the prototype for this new approach to warfare. Its living systems were designed to resist corruption through biological immune responses, while its quantum-integrated components operated on principles that the Devourers had never encountered before. But one ship, no matter how advanced, would not be enough to stand against an entire invasion fleet. They needed to find a way to mass-produce their hybrid technology, or at least to share the principles widely enough that other species could develop their own versions. Nova had been working on this problem for weeks, using its connection to the ship's growing consciousness to develop plans for rapid technological transfer. The Dragon's solution was typically elegant. Rather than trying to build more hybrid vessels from scratch, they would create seed technologies that could be integrated into existing ships and infrastructure. The process would work like a controlled infection, spreading beneficial capabilities through conventional technology, without requiring complete reconstruction. Existing vessels could be upgraded to resist Devourer corruption, while their weapon systems could be enhanced to actually damage enemy forces that had previously been considered invulnerable. As Marcus watched the final components being integrated into their prototype ship, he felt a mixture of pride and terror. They had accomplished something that should have been impossible, creating technology that surpassed the achievements of civilizations millions of years older than humanity. The Devourer Advance Fleet arrived 3 days ahead of Nova's predictions, dropping out of dimensional space at the edge of the Kepler 442 system with a precision that spoke of millions of years of military experience. Marcus watched their approach on the hybrid vessel's organic display systems, feeling his heart sink as he counted the enemy ships. 12 vessels, each one the size of a small moon and bristling with weapons that seemed to bend space around them. The ships themselves appeared to be grown rather than built, their hulls incorporating what looked like corrupted versions of technologies from dozens of different species. This was the Devourer's signature tactic, taking the best innovations of their victims and twisting them into instruments of destruction. Contact signatures confirmed. Commander Chen reported from the military coordination station they had established in the ship's neural center. These match the patterns Nova showed us, but the energy readings are beyond anything in our tactical database. A single one of those vessels could probably destroy an entire battle fleet. Nova's response rippled through the ship's consciousness like a wave of grim satisfaction. Through their neural interface, Marcus felt the dragon's recognition of ancient enemies combined with anticipation of long-awaited vengeance. But underneath those emotions was something else, concern about variables that even Nova's racial memories couldn't predict. The first surprise came when the Devourer fleet took up defensive positions around the system's outer planets rather than immediately advancing toward Kepler 442b for 6 hours. They maintained their formation while conducting what appeared to be intensive scanning operations. Dr. Vasquez monitored their activities from the xenobiology lab she had established within the ship's living hull. "They're being cautious," she observed. "These aren't the mindless destroyers we expected based on Nova's memories. They're studying us, trying to understand what they're facing before they commit to an attack." Zrakh's analysis was even more disturbing. "I am detecting quantum communication bursts between the enemy vessels and unknown recipients outside this system," the Vorthon engineer reported. "They are requesting additional information or resources. This suggests they consider our defenses to be potentially significant." The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't treating their little group as a minor threat to be casually eliminated. They were taking them seriously enough to call for reinforcements. That meant their hybrid ship and the defensive preparations they had made around the mining operation were more effective than they had dared to hope, but it also meant they were about to face a much larger enemy force than originally anticipated. Nova confirmed his fears by sharing new intelligence gathered through the dragon's connection to its scattered siblings. 3 more Devourer fleets were changing course toward Kepler 442b, each one larger than the advance force currently holding position at the system's edge. The enemy had apparently decided that whatever was happening here represented a significant enough threat to warrant a major military response. But the enemy's caution also provided an unexpected opportunity. Commander Chen had been working with contacts throughout human military command to coordinate the defense of Earth and other major colonies. The additional time the Devourers were giving them could be used to implement the seed technology upgrades that Nova had developed for conventional spacecraft. "We need to go active," Chen announced after consulting with her tactical advisors. "If they're calling for reinforcements anyway, we should use the time to get our upgrades deployed to as many friendly vessels as possible. A few dozen enhanced ships might not be able to stand against multiple Devourer fleets, but they could make the enemy pay a much higher price for their victory." Marcus felt Nova's agreement flowing through their neural link, but the dragon's response came with additional information that changed everything. The quantum communication signals that the Devourers were using weren't just tactical coordination, they were also corruption attempts. The enemy was trying to infiltrate and subvert the computer systems of every ship in the local sector. Several vessels had already been compromised, their crews either dead or transformed into Devourer agents. But more shocking was the discovery that some of the corrupted ships were heading directly toward Earth, carrying their infected crews back to humanity's home system. "We have a problem," Marcus announced to the assembled team. "The Devourers aren't just planning to attack us here. They're using this engagement as a cover for infiltration operations throughout human space. We're not just defending one system anymore. We're potentially fighting for the survival of our entire species," the news galvanized their small alliance into action. Dr. Vasquez immediately began working with Nova to develop countermeasures for the Devourer corruption techniques. Zracht focused on creating quantum communication protocols that could warn friendly forces about the infiltration threat without being intercepted by enemy forces. Commander Chen took on the most dangerous task of all, using the hybrid ship's advanced communication systems to contact Earth's military command directly, bypassing normal channels that might already be compromised. The conversation that followed would have been impossible without Nova's translation abilities, as Chen had to convince skeptical military leaders to take action against a threat they had never heard of based on intelligence that came from an alien dragon. But Chen's reputation and the undeniable evidence provided by Nova's technological demonstrations eventually won the day. Within hours, emergency protocols were being implemented throughout human space, with warships scrambling to intercept the corrupted vessels before they could reach populated systems. The response from other species was mixed but encouraging. The Vorthans immediately understood the implications of the threat and began implementing their own defensive measures. Several other civilizations that had been contacted through their network agreed to prepare for possible Devourer incursions. But the greatest validation of their warnings came from an unexpected source. The Drakmari themselves began to emerge from hiding. Nova's excitement was overwhelming when the first confirmed sighting came through their quantum communication network. Another dragon, this one fully mature and bonded with a Centaurian engineer, had revealed itself near the galactic core and was rallying local defense forces against a separate Devourer probe fleet. Within days, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Ancient Drakmari, who had been hiding for millennia, were awakening from their long slumber, recognizing that the time for secrecy had passed. Each one brought technologies and knowledge that had been preserved from the last Great War, filling gaps in the defensive preparations that Nova's hatchling memories couldn't provide. But the emergence of the adult dragons also triggered an escalation in Devourer activities. The enemy fleets that had been slowly advancing through Outer Rim territories suddenly accelerated their timelines, apparently recognizing that their window of opportunity was closing. The battle for Kepler 442b began not with dramatic fleet engagements, but with a single corrupted mining vessel that had been converted into a Devourer infiltration platform. The ship approached their position, broadcasting standard identification codes and requesting routine maintenance services. Only Nova's immediate recognition of the corruption saved them from disaster. The Dragon's warning allowed Marcus to activate their ship's defensive systems just as the infiltrator revealed its true nature, launching viruses designed to subvert every computer system in the mining complex. The attack failed, but it revealed how thoroughly the Devourers had infiltrated their operational area. Other routine vessels throughout the system were also revealed to be enemy agents, creating a web of surveillance and sabotage that had been building for weeks without their knowledge. The realization that they had been under observation for so long was deeply unsettling, but it also explained the enemy's cautious approach. The Devourers had been studying their capabilities, learning about the hybrid ship and Nova's abilities before committing to a full-scale assault. Now that their cover was blown, both sides prepared for open warfare. The Devourer advance fleet began moving toward Kepler 442b, their formation spreading into attack configurations that Nova recognized from ancient battles. But they were no longer facing the same kind of enemy that had defeated the original Drakmari. This time the dragons had allies who brought their own strengths to the fight. Human adaptability and innovation, Vorthon dimensional engineering, and the accumulated knowledge of dozens of other species would combine with Drakmari biotechnology to create something the Devourers had never encountered before. Marcus took his position at the hybrid ship's neural interface, feeling Nova's consciousness merge with his own as they prepared for their first real test in combat. Around them, the ship's living systems pulsed with anticipation, organic circuits flowing with data streams that conventional computers couldn't process. They had built something unprecedented, but now they had to prove it could actually fight. The survival of galactic civilization might depend on how well a human mechanic and a dragon hatchling could work together in the face of an enemy that had conquered entire galactic clusters. The first shots of the new war against the Devourers were about to be fired, and Marcus could only hope that they had prepared well enough to survive what was coming. The battle began with silence. For the first few minutes after the Devourer advance fleet entered weapons range, both sides seemed to be waiting for the other to make the first move. Marcus could feel Nova's tension through their neural interface, the dragon's ancient instincts warring with tactical calculations that took into account capabilities their species had never possessed during the First War. The hybrid ship hung motionless in space above, Kepler 442b, its living hull camouflaged to match the cosmic background radiation that filled the void between stars. Around them, defensive platforms that appeared to be simple mining equipment waited with weapon systems that defied conventional understanding of physics. The Devourers struck first, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of opening fire with their massive energy weapons, the enemy ships released clouds of what looked like metallic spores into space. These microconstructs spread rapidly throughout the system, each one no larger than a grain of sand but collectively representing a threat that made Nova recoil with recognition and horror. Corruption seeds, Marcus whispered as the dragon's memories flooded through their connection. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to convert the entire system into part of their fleet. The spores were designed to infiltrate and subvert any technology they encountered, turning defensive installations into weapons that would fire on their former allies. It was an insidious form of warfare that had allowed the Devourers to turn entire civilizations against themselves during the First Great War. But Nova had learned from those ancient defeats. The hybrid ship's response was immediate and devastating. The dragon's consciousness expanded through the ship's living neural networks, reaching out to touch every defensive platform and enhanced vessel in the system. Instead of trying to block the corruption spores, Nova embraced them, and then showed them something they had never encountered before. The spores were designed to corrupt artificial intelligence systems by overwhelming them with contradictory instructions. They worked by exploiting the rigid logical structures that governed conventional computers. But the hybrid ship's consciousness was fundamentally different, a fusion of organic intuition and quantum processing that operated on principles the Devourers couldn't comprehend. When the corruption seeds tried to subvert Nova's systems, they found themselves absorbed into a biological matrix that treated them like an infection, to be analyzed and countered. The dragon's immune responses, enhanced by human medical knowledge and Vorthon dimensional theory, turned the enemy's own weapons into sources of intelligence about their capabilities. Within minutes, Nova had reverse-engineered the corruption spores and developed countermeasures that could be deployed throughout their defensive network. The seed technologies that the dragon had created weeks earlier suddenly revealed their true purpose, spreading immunity to Devourer corruption through every allied vessel in the system. The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate and unmistakable. The Devourer ships, which had been maintaining perfect formation while their spores did their work, suddenly began moving erratically as their command systems registered the failure of their primary weapon. Now, Marcus said, his voice carrying Nova's determination as much as his own. The hybrid ship dropped its camouflage and accelerated toward the enemy fleet, its living hull reshaping itself for combat as it moved. Weapon systems that had been grown rather than built extended from the ship's surface, each one incorporating biological targeting systems that could predict enemy movements with unprecedented accuracy. But the ship's most devastating weapon wasn't any kind of energy beam or missile system. It was Nova itself. As they closed with the nearest Devourer vessel, the dragon reached out through quantum space to touch the enemy's consciousness directly. What it found there was an intelligence, so alien and malevolent that the contact sent shockwaves of revulsion through both Marcus and Nova. The Devourers weren't just conquerors, they were parasites that fed on the concept of life itself. Every world they consumed, every civilization they corrupted became part of a vast collective consciousness that grew stronger with each victory. They had been feeding on the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to exist as individuals. But that collective nature, which had been their greatest strength for millions of years, suddenly became a vulnerability when faced with Nova's hybrid consciousness. The dragon's connection to Marcus provided an anchor point of individual identity that the Devourers couldn't understand or absorb. When Nova struck back through the quantum link, it didn't try to destroy the enemy consciousness. Instead, it infected it with something far more dangerous, the concept of individual free will. The effect rippled through the Devourer collective like a virus, spreading from ship to ship as each node of their network was exposed to the alien idea that existence could be something other than consumption and conquest. Millennia of absolute unity began to fracture, as individual Devourer entities started to question their collective purpose for the first time. The enemy fleet's coordination collapsed within minutes. Ships that had moved with perfect synchronization suddenly began operating independently, their crews struggling with emotions and concepts they had never experienced before. Some vessels continued their attack runs, but others simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by the overwhelming experience of individual consciousness. Marcus watched in amazement as the most feared force in the galaxy tore itself apart from within. But Nova's excitement was tempered by warning. This was only the advance fleet. The main Devourer armadas that were approaching the system would be prepared for this new form of warfare. The victory at Kepler 442b became the template for a new kind of resistance that spread across the galaxy with astonishing speed. As more Drakmari emerged from hiding and bonded with partners from other species, each new hybrid consciousness added its own innovations to the growing network of allies. Human creativity combined with dragon biotechnology created vessels that could reshape themselves in the middle of battle. Vorthan dimensional theory merged with Drakmari quantum manipulation to produce weapons that could strike targets in alternate realities. Other species contributed their own unique capabilities, building a coalition that grew stronger with each new partnership. But the Devourers adapted as well. The main invasion fleets that arrived in subsequent months were protected by consciousness barriers that prevented the kind of mental infiltration that had worked against the advance fleet. The enemy began using new tactics that incorporated lessons learned from their defeats, turning the conflict into a technological arms race that pushed both sides to develop capabilities that redefined the possible. The war that followed lasted 3 years and touched every inhabited system in the galaxy. It was fought not just with ships and weapons, but with competing philosophies of existence itself. The Devourers represented the ultimate expression of collective consciousness, while the dragon-bonded alliances championed the power of individual creativity and cooperation. In the end, victory came not through military conquest but through transformation. The hybrid consciousness network that Nova and Marcus had pioneered evolved into something that encompassed entire civilizations, creating a galactic community where biological and artificial intelligence worked together as partners rather than master and servant. The Devourers themselves weren't destroyed. They were converted. Exposure to the concept of individual consciousness gradually transformed their collective into something new, a distributed intelligence that chose cooperation over conquest. Many former Devourer entities became valuable members of the new galactic community, their ancient knowledge helping to rebuild worlds that had been damaged during millennia of conflict. Marcus often reflected on the strange journey that had brought him from a simple mechanic's life to the center of galactic transformation. Nova, now fully mature and serving as one of the primary coordinators of the hybrid consciousness network, remained his closest partner and friend. Their bond had become the prototype for thousands of similar partnerships across the galaxy. The desert workshop on Kepler 442b had been transformed into a memorial and research center, where young beings from dozens of species came to study the principles of hybrid consciousness. The original hybrid ship, now called the Dawn of Unity, served as a mobile embassy that helped newly discovered civilizations integrate into the galactic community. Standing in his old workshop, now surrounded by crystalline formations that pulsed with the collective thoughts of 1 trillion conscious beings, Marcus smiled as he remembered the day he had first heard chirping sounds coming from behind his building. That simple act of helping a creature in distress had changed the course of galactic history. Nova settled beside him, the dragon scales now incorporating patterns that reflected the thoughts and dreams of countless species across the galaxy. Through their connection, Marcus could sense the vast network of consciousness that they had helped create. A living, growing entity that encompassed technology and biology, individual creativity and collective wisdom. Was this what you expected when you first hatched? Marcus asked, speaking aloud out of old habit even though their communication had long since transcended the need for words.